Welcome, everybody. So, I'm Lianne Shinton, Pet Biz Experts, rebranding to Automation Dogs, and we provide a CRM software for dog trainers. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Stephanie O'Brien. I've known Stephanie for a long time. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hey.
Hey, hey. So you have DOGenius Canine Education. You're located in Fallbrook area of California between Fallbrook and Temecula, and you're also an amazing breeder. I met you at a seminar in like Pennsylvania, I think when you were
Oh
living in
my
New
gosh.
York.
Yeah, I probably still lived in New York at the time, and yeah, that was a really long time ago. I mean, that has to be probably almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, and you were
Yeah.
hardcore in the French ring at the time, just a
Oh yeah.
baby.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think I may have still been working with Waleed at the time too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember. Yeah, so it's been a long time.
Yes, and I remember Fat Louie.
Yeah, yeah. Crazy Fat Louie.
Yeah, he was pretty
Oh,
cool.
wow.
And
Yeah.
and so today I wanted to talk about like your journey, get a little bit of like background, amazing woman entrepreneur, also moving across the country. Like you've really like done some big things and a very reputable and respected and my favorite breeder because I have one of your dogs. So maybe share a little bit about yourself.
Oh, sure. I think it's kind of challenging for me to do now because I feel like I've lived so many lives and sometimes, you ever think back and you're like, that really happened? I really went there, or I really did that, and it's kind of crazy to think about because I think now for me, and I think this happens when you get older, is that things calm down a little bit. Your mind calms down a little bit. You're a little wiser. You can be a little quieter about things and kind of let things happen versus trying to make them happen. And when I was younger, I was always trying to make things happen. I wanted all these things out of life. I wanted all these experiences, and I always loved animals. So I just things couldn't happen fast enough, and I got into dogs. We've always had dogs in my family, but I got into dog training professionally kind of on accident. It was not something that I thought was a career option when I was younger. I didn't know that this may sound silly to people now, but back then, um, you went to a dog trainer, but there were not many dog trainers. So, we didn't have internet. We
Hmm.
looked in a phone book,
Hmm.
and there were a couple dog trainers, and that was it. So we didn't have access to anything else except for local dog trainers and some books. And the books, most of them were not very good back then. So I was very into riding horses and got very obsessed from an early age with training and conditioning horses. And I worked with a couple different trainers, one in particular that she was like a second mom to me. And I think she really, to be honest, I think she influenced the way that I deal with clients, just because she was such a great patient teacher, and she just had a way of making you feel good, making you feel confident, and making it safe to try things. And, I think also being coached from a very young age by multiple different professionals, right? Definitely shaped the way that I deal with clients and the way that I communicate with clients, especially in sessions. So, from an early age, I think that I was unknowingly conditioned to be a decent dog trainer, just
Yeah.
just all these things because a lot of people get into dog training thinking they're just going to play with puppies all day, and that you know it couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
It's mostly working with people and uh, being a on the fly problem solver, not only with
Mm-hmm.
dogs but with people, and that could be very challenging.
That
So
what you just said there is very impactful. On the fly,
yeah,
on the fly. Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. And people a lot of times are not coming to you because everything's great. They're coming to you because they're in some sort of crisis,
Mm-hmm.
maybe internally within themselves, and their dog may actually be totally okay. um, Maybe they think it's their dog, and you're just helping dogs and people kind of work through problems and find that path again. And it's hard. It's hard. It's very rewarding a lot of times, but it can also be extremely taxing. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that um, our experiences in life, set us up to be either good or not very good at doing those things, right? Kind of like when we raise a little puppy, we can either teach them how to handle stress, or we can try to keep stress away from them. And we may hurt them by doing that, right? So I feel so weird just constantly talking about myself, but
Well, I wanted to
um,
ask too, just to give you
yeah,
a chance to
just
take a
interrupt
breath.
and ask.
I know that your dad still lives in New York. Were your
Yes.
parents very entrepreneurial? Like you've always been quite a go-getter and kind of in there with the boys wearing bite suits and
Yeah,
doing
not at
French
all.
ring?
Yeah,
No?
not at all. My mom, she's very she was a nurse, a registered nurse
Okay.
for the
So
majority
good with
of her life.
people.
Very quiet. She's very kind of introverted and kind of private, and but she always loved animals. So I'm assuming the love of animals kind of comes from that side. But my mom was she's kind of stays on the straight correct path type of person. So which has its wonderful advantages in life that I don't know about. Um, yeah, and then my dad is the complete opposite. So my dad is he's kind of big, friendly, loud, big hearted, extroverted, needs I tell him all the time, I'm like, Dad, just calm down, just sit down and be quiet for a little while. He just, he wants to be involved in everything all the time, and he wants to help all the time. Um, I don't, consider either of my parents really entrepreneurial. Um, my dad does run a business,
Okay.
and he has for a long time, and he's, I do think a part of my need to be active all the time, and I'm not just talking about physically, I'm talking about mentally. My need to be occupied and active all the time probably comes from him. Um, he's just always restless. He's always restless. He needs to do something all the time, and I definitely understand that. But it's hard to police that. It's hard to police that. But yeah, my parents are, I guess by all means, pretty regular people. Um, like they weren't dog trainers, but my mom, we did raise guide dogs for Guiding Eyes for the
Okay.
yeah, in New York, and we raised a couple of them, and it was basically taking a puppy from them and raising them their first year. And I'm sure things are a lot different now based on what I see, but back then our responsibility was to socialize the puppy and put basic training into them.
Mm-hmm.
So they were expected to walk nicely on leash and sit and down and be crate trained. So it's crazy, but I don't understand. Like, I've never lived with an out of control dog, and I don't we've always crate trained all of our dogs growing up, so it was never a foreign thing to me. It was always a very normal thing. So it was kind of hard for me when I first got into dog training. I couldn't understand how people had such heathens for dogs. I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, what do you mean crate training's bad? Or
Yeah.
what do you mean he jumps on you? It wasn't something that was ever allowed in our household. My mom was very strict with our dogs, and our dogs were always very well trained. And my mom did work with trainers. Do you remember Brian Kilcommons?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I met him
that was our
too.
first dog trainer.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
That's
because
so cool.
it was before he was famous and well known. At least I mean, I don't remember it, but that's what my mom told me. I remember a long time ago, and then I did get to meet
Cool.
him when Waleed and oh God, I got this like little gnat or something that got in the house. My uh, I'm trying to remember. It had to be back in like 2005 or 2006. I got to meet him, and
Cool.
he was super cool. Yeah, Waleed and I went up to go do a workshop with him, and it's 20 freaking years ago. I feel old now, but it was just kind of crazy coming full circle a little bit like that. But yeah, so basically always had dogs in my life, and then when I was a teenager I got into a little bit of junior handling with a doberman that I got
Oh.
that was my dog. um, my mom picked him out for me. He was not a really good dog. He was scared of a lot of things. He didn't really have good nerves, but he was real friendly, and he had no drive other than some food drive. But I exhausted all training possibilities for him, and showed him. I even tried to do I think I was maybe 14 at the time. I tried to do like a novice CD on him with AKC, and he actually did really well because he was very trained, but he got really nervous in the long down, got up and left and started running around. I was very
Oh.
embarrassed. Yeah, I was very embarrassed. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this again. I need a braver dog, you know?
Oh yeah.
Um, and then I continued I continued riding horses and working with my trainer and training some horses and schooling horses until I was around 18. And I I'm trying to think. Yeah, I had worked at a busy vet practice also at the same time. So I was riding horses. I was still playing around with my dogs, but I didn't know about protection sports or anything other than maybe obedience competitions at that point. I had no idea protection sports existed. And I don't really know how there would be a way for me to know that. And I worked at the vet. So that was kind of my life. And I went to school. I went to college. And then my family, we ended up, one of our German Shepherds got old and passed away. And we wanted a new German Shepherd. So I didn't want another wussy dog like my Doberman. So, yeah, bless him. But, I was so limited in what I could do with him. And I was like, oh, this is no fun. He's scared of everything. But he was okay. He was a good dog. So we found a breeder from the paper, the newspaper, because that's what we did back then.
Yep.
And yeah, and so went and saw they had one puppy left. It was a German Shepherd puppy, and it was West German show lines, which was at that time light years better than anything we had locally as far as German Shepherds. And went to go check them out, and the puppy was super cool. I really, really liked him. We ended up getting him, and his breeder, who was a younger guy, and he imported a couple of dogs, ended up telling me, he showed me a big book, and it was the big SB. Again, we didn't really have internet, so like we couldn't find all this stuff on the internet. And when you had the West German showline dogs, they had a big book that they sold every year that had all the pictures of the V-rated German Shepherds over in Germany, and all the studs and all the dogs with their ratings. And I was like, okay, they have this little V or letters in front of them. That's for show, right? I'm like, what are all these letters behind them? Are they titles? And he's like, yeah. I said, what's this SCH 3, and he's like, "Oh, that's Schutzhund." And I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" And he's like, "Schutzhund." He goes, where they they put on a sleeve and they do protection and they do tracking, where they follow tracks in grass or whatever, and then they do some. I'm like, hold up, hold up. I was like, they do what? They put on a what? And he explained it to me, and I was like, where can I sign up for this? Is this only in Germany? And he's like, no, they do it here. And I'm like, oh. And he's like, we have a club. And I'm like, oh, that day changed my life. Changed
Wow.
my life. He's like, hey, the mother of your puppy is a Schutzhund too. Do you want to take a bite from her? And I'm like, whoa, 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 hold up. Yeah. I was like, this is the best day of my life. And so he brought out this, big Schutzhund arm sleeve and put it on me, and he told me, just kind of stand over there. He showed me how to catch, and he sent her on me from like 15 feet away, and I was like, yep, yep, sold. There is nothing else we need to talk about. And my mom knew everything was over from that point on. She's like, she wanted me to be a veterinarian or something like that, and I just I'm good at a lot of things, but I'm not so good at sitting in a class and, taking notes and doing all that stuff. It was always just a little bit of a big ask for me. I was not, I was an okay student in high school and everything like that. And college was super boring for me. I'm like, I'm not learning anything meaningful here. Um, could have, maybe I missed the point, but I was just, I'm a hands-on person, and
Hmm.
I want to get out and experience stuff and see things in real time rather than sit in a desk and talk about it. So this was right up my alley. And that's it. I started going out to this club, and it wasn't a really good club by, standards currently. It was not a good club, but it was all I knew, and it was the most amazing thing ever.
Hmm.
And that really just kind of sparked my love for something I didn't even know existed. And I started apprenticing under a couple trainers. So the first one I apprenticed under was, I didn't know that there were different kinds of trainers back then. So I didn't know there were trainers that only used positive reinforcement and didn't correct dogs. I just, again, the way that I was brought up and we trained our dogs, that worked. We always used reward and correction. So that was never strange to me. And I just thought, I was like, oh, okay, reward training, so positive only training, or what we call like force free training, is that like what they do with the dolphins and the orcas? Because I think that's super cool. um, but I don't know it outside of marine mammals. I was always very fascinated with that. It's just that, like, I can swim and swimming's cool, but I don't want to do that kind of swimming, So that was marine mammal training. Always intrigued me, and then I think zoos had started really kind of playing around with more of that stuff around that time too. So that was always interesting, but I didn't know there were dog trainers out there doing that. So the dog trainer that I first started apprenticing under, it didn't last long. It lasted maybe, I want to say 5 months. And the reason being is I didn't like the way the dogs were being trained. They were only using e-collars, and that's Alfie scratching on his bed. I don't know if
It's
that's
all good.
okay. He's good now. He's good now. We're okay. Good now. Um, I don't know. Uh, I didn't. That was my introduction to e-collars. I'd never touched an e-collar. I'd never used an e-collar. They were very intimidating to me, and I had seen a couple people with them on their dogs at club, but this was like the first trainer I had seen e-collars with, and this is a long time ago. So the collar that this trainer was using was an old Initech And do you remember the Inatex where it was a little tiny black remote?
Yes.
Okay, it was a cheap Initech and it was a little tiny black remote and you had to take the back off to change the level and use this little stylus to change the level and I just was like, so why would we use this? I'm like, I don't, thinking back, I'm like, that was absolutely crazy. Crazy. Like, how, other than using that on just one level for punishment, basically, this is useless, but
Mm-hmm.
back then that was my introduction. And I was like, I saw the way it was used and I saw the dogs, and I didn't like them. I didn't like them. Yeah, right. Me, not like e-collars, right? So I was like, I'm never putting one of those on my dog, ever, ever. This is horrible. Like, I don't like this. And there was one dog in particular. It was a mini schnauzer. I'll never forget it. Went to the house and the way the trainer was doing things, I hated it. I hated it. And I was like, this is not what I wanted to learn. So I stopped going to that trainer and I stopped learning under him because it wasn't, I didn't know much back then, but I knew that wasn't it. I have some understanding of training at that point because of horses, right? And
Yeah.
and the little that, I've done with dogs, so I wasn't a complete idiot at that point, but I was like, this is not for me. So I ended up apprenticing under there was a trainer in the club and he had titled dogs in Schutzhund. They weren't he was not from the United States. He was foreign, but I thought his dogs listened really well and I thought they did cool stuff and they were some of the stronger dogs in the club as far as protection, and they had German shepherds and they had pit bulls, and those were two things that I really really liked. Um in fact, I had a pit bull at that time. I had a German shepherd, the one that I got from the breeder, and I was trying to work him in club. But they were kind of heavy handed. They were kind of heavy handed. They didn't really use e collars. My guess now, knowing what I know now, is because of the German influence.
Mm.
A lot of it was, you know, turn and jerk and a lot of heavy handed type of stuff. And then, they were very like, oh, e-collars are for pansies, things like that. And I'm like, okay, I don't know any of this stuff, but okay, I guess they are. I don't like them anyway. So down with that. And my German Shepherd puppy he had ball drive, but his food drive was not good. He was a really good dog, but he didn't have a lot of interest in biting very early on. And the club was not very helpful. I don't think they knew how to work them.
Mm-hmm.
And they told me that there was this seminar that was being hosted by this big Schutzhund trainer from Germany. And I was like, oh, okay, let me sign up for that. And I'd never been to a dog training seminar before this. This was my first one ever. So I was like, cool, let me sign up for that. I'll bring my puppy. And surely this trainer will help me get my dog biting. And, maybe this is a normal thing. And I went to this seminar and I was very disappointed. My heart was broken because when we get a dog in our family, like, it stays. There's no swapping it out or getting another dog or rehoming it. That was not a thing for my family back then. We got a dog, we kept it until it died,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what. And I was like, this dog has to work. And I liked him. He was a cool dog. He wasn't scared of stuff. He was really stable, really friendly, and he loved a ball, but anything else he didn't really care about. And brought him to the seminar, paid, which for me back then was a lot of money. I paid $100 just to work my dog with this guy, this big wig trainer, for a couple minutes. And he told me to tie my puppy out. I tied him out. And he got a rag, waved it around in front of my puppy for a minute. And my puppy was like, I have no idea what to do with this. And he basically told me he's not going to work. And I was like, it broke my heart. It broke my heart because I wanted more than anything to do protection work. And now I have another dog who can't do protection work.
Mm.
And I was like, no, I'm not, no, this answer is unacceptable. Like, whatever this guy thinks, fine. But I don't understand why my dog will chase a ball, but he won't chase and bite a rag. There has to be a way to work this. So I took him home, my puppy, and he was like 5 or 6 months old. I took him home, and every day after that, I tied him out every single day, and I teased him with a towel. I didn't have a rag. I teased him with a towel on a leash, and I like jumped around and yelled and did all these things, and he got more and more frustrated. And as time went on, he ended up biting it, and then I think someone in club gave me a rag because remember we didn't have online. We couldn't
Yeah.
just like, and I didn't know where to buy all these things, and I found a place later on. But and I was a broke ass college kid, just trying to do the thing. So it's not like I had money to do all this stuff. So he eventually started biting and got him biting the rag and got him biting a tug and so on, and was able to start doing a little bit of work with them. So I was like, oh, okay. Um, but then not too long after that, I ended up having an accident, which left me in the hospital for almost 2 weeks, like a solid week and a half at least, from what I remember. And I couldn't walk for a little while, and it everything changed. Everything changed. I was forced to sell my horse. I had a horse at the time that I loved dearly, but I couldn't work, and I don't come from money, so there was nobody to pay my bills for me. So I had to sell my horse, and I did so with tears in my eyes. And there's a fairy tale ending to that, but thankfully, many years later. But I went full blown into dogs after that, because my accident was dog related. It was due to aggression, and there were no resources for me to research or understand aggression in dogs at that time. And um, there were no trainers that could explain to me things that happened, stuff like that. So I was in a mad rush after that to learn and really deeply understand aggression and dog behavior. Um, and I ended up, so once I was able to start doing some things physically again, I wanted to get back into training, right? But due to the accident occurring within the previous group, I couldn't go back there, right? Um, so I went back to it was a store that sold working dog stuff, and they did some boarding, and they were trainers. They were hosting a seminar. And I went there because I was looking for another German Shepherd, because the German Shepherd puppy that I had, which was now almost a year old, had hip dysplasia, elbow
Oh.
dysplasia. Oh yeah, and he ended up bloating later. He had all sorts of health issues. He was a fantastic dog, but super unhealthy.
Mm.
So I couldn't do training with them because every time I tried to, something was wrong with him. So we just kind of gave up and let him be a pet, right? So my mother agreed to let me getting another dog. I was looking for another German Shepherd puppy, and I just couldn't find one. I couldn't find one, and locally was basically my only option. Because again, no, we had internet at that point, but there were no breeders online. So I was kind of giving up, and then they were like, they bred Malinois over at that store, right? They bred Malinois, and I was like, well, I don't want one of those, because the only Malinois I had seen, which was at that Schutzhund club, was horrible. Not bad, horrible.
Mm.
And I'm like, I never want one of those. I had not seen any good Malinois. I'd only seen German Shepherds and some pit bulls, and that was really it. So I'm like, I don't want a Malinois. And I heard you can't live with them. I heard they can't live in the house, and all these other crazy things that people used to say about Malinois. And she's like, no, no, that's not true. You should check them out. And I'm like, okay. She's like, they're kind of like German Shepherds, you know? And I'm like, oh, okay. So she had these two leftover puppies. And I checked them out, and they were both girls. And one of them was just like terrified of everything. And I was like, okay, well, I definitely don't want that one. And so she put that one away. And then there was this other female, and she was kind of checking some stuff out. She was a little timid, but she liked to chase a ball. And I was like, oh, okay. So I ended up getting talked into this puppy, which I was told was registered. And you know, I asked, I'm not an idiot, right? I'm like, I need registration if I'm going to do anything with the dog. I need registration to do Schutzhund. And then, you know, are the parents health tested? And she told me they were, but there was no way for me to verify that back then,
Mm,
other than taking her word for it. Turns out, I know you're not going to believe this, but they weren't health tested or registered.
shocking.
Um, yeah, but okay. The silver lining to my misfortune was she told me about another seminar that was being held there. And I was like, cool, I'll sign up for it. What is it, Schutzhund? And she goes, no. She goes, it's for this sport called ring sport.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh, ring sport sounds dumb, you know? I was like, yeah, I was like, what is ring sport? And she's like, it's just like Schutzhund, but way better. And I'm like, there can't be anything better than Schutzhund. Schützen's the best. You know, like, how can you get, she goes, well, she goes, you know, the sleeves they bite, right? And I said, yeah. And she goes, they put suits on, special suits that they bite. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Okay. Okay. All right. Look, sign me up. Sign me up. I'm going. And she goes, you should go. You should definitely go. There'll be a lot of, you know, cool people there. And I'm like, cool. So a couple weeks go by, and I show up for this seminar, and all in one place, you'll freak out. All in one place, we have Walid Malouf, Michael Ellis,
Oh.
Francis Metcalf. Yeah, like all these, you know, big time. Not then they were, you know, they weren't then, but ended up becoming big trainers, and then a couple of really well known trainers and decoys from Belgium. And then obviously there were other people that came to the workshop. Just an incredible, incredible weekend. I had no idea what I was in for. And I walk out there and I see an American bulldog. I see an American bulldog with this guy
Mm-hmm.
doing a 2.3 Palisade wall. I'm like, hold up. I'm overstimulated right now. You know, like, I've never seen an American bulldog before this day. I've never seen a Palisade wall before this
Mm.
day. I've never seen anything like this, and I couldn't absorb all of it. I was overwhelmed, in a good way. I was overwhelmed, and I I saw all these dogs doing this cool shit. You know, just Malinois. I saw Malinois after Malinois come out. They were happy. They were excited. They were biting. They were cool dogs. I saw not many German Shepherds, and Francis had Gubby at the time, and Gubby was very young, and I saw Gubby, and I thought he was a pit bull. I thought he was the coolest looking pit bull I'd ever seen. Obviously, he was an American bulldog. And I remember sitting on the bench, and Gubby was also sitting on the bench. And Francis was like, "You can pet him. He's cool." And I'm
Oh.
like, "Really?" And he's like, "He's totally cool." And I sat there with Gubby for the longest time. I was in love, in love. And I saw Gubby. I was like, that was. I saw him do bite work. I was like, that's the same dog I was just hugging on the bench, biting this guy in a suit, and incredible stuff. And then I met Walid. Walid was very shy and kind of quiet, and he paraded out, you know, a couple of his Malinois, and I just saw really cool training. And one thing I noticed on all of these dogs, Lianne, was what? They all wore e-collars. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, no, 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 no. That's the bad collar. That's the bad collar. I'm like, but why are these dogs so happy and so motivated? And they don't care. They don't care that they have a shock collar on them. And I met Mike Ellis. I saw Mike Ellis. He brought Fautois and Lotar
Oh,
out. Yep. And I was in love.
wow.
Fautois looked great. You know, that was all good. But I was in love with Lotar, in love. And to this day, and people are gonna laugh, I I always remembered Lotar. Lotar was probably the opposite of what Michael likes now, and the opposite of Fautois. He was a very large, very stable, very confident male Malinois. He was beautiful and he was a bulldozer.
Mm.
And he wasn't as fast as Fautois. He wasn't twitchy like Fautois. But he was a powerful big Malinois. And like, I just, to this day, that dog is stuck in my mind. Not necessarily as the end all be all of Malinois, but he set a standard in my head. I was like, wait a minute, I like this Malinois. And then I really liked Waleed had a dog back then. I don't know if he still had him for the seminar that we met you at, but Damie.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, Damie was from Belgium. And he was, so people love to talk about bull herders today. I knew what bull herders were long before any of these people because Damie was a bull herder. And not a lot of people know that, but
Can
he
you
was a quarter
explain
bull
what a
herder.
bull herder is?
A bull herder is a cross between usually either a Malinois or a Dutch Shepherd and some type of bulldog, pit bull.
Got it.
A lot of the guys use Pressa now, but back then it was usually pit bull or bull terrier. So Damie was part bull terrier, and I thought he was the coolest dog ever. He was absolutely nothing but frustration for Waleed, but I loved Damie, and I also have him in the back of my head. You know, a lot of times as far as the type of Malinois that I like, which you know I guess is a joke because he's a bull herder. So that day was another incredibly pivotal day for me as far as a budding dog trainer. And then I remembered I had a Malinois puppy and she was terrible. She was awful. She was scared of so many things. She submissive peed when I got her. It wasn't something that I did. She
Yeah.
very car sick. I remember bringing her home from that place before the seminar, and she pooped, peed, and threw up in her crate on the 15-minute ride home.
Mm.
And I didn't have an airline crate back then. I didn't have a closed one. It was a wire crate in the back of my vehicle. So you can imagine how that went. My mom was like, "What is this? This is not a German Shepherd." And everybody was incredibly welcoming at this seminar. I'm still friends with all of them to this day. So, you know, Michael, Francis, Waleed, you know, we all still talk to this day, and some of the guys over in Belgium too. And then they're like, "Hey, do you have a dog?" And I'm like, "Uh, yeah, you know." And they're
Mm.
like, "Let's see." I'm like, "I have a Malinois. I just got her." And they're like, "Oh, okay. You know, is she biting? Is she doing this?" I'm like, "Look, I don't really know anything. I'm kind of new, and I didn't know if this was okay to say." I'm like, "Honestly, I don't really like her. You know, like
Yeah.
she's cute, but she doesn't want to do anything. You know, she's not food motivated." I think I made a mistake getting her, but she came from here. And when I told them that, they all kind of looked at each other and they're like, okay. And I didn't know if that was bad on me or like they understood why my dog didn't do anything. And turns out, you know, the minute I said that, they understood my puppy probably sucked because
Yeah.
they know the lines and they know the breeder. And she
Hmm.
probably, I probably was not lying when I said she was no good. So they said, well, let's see her, you know? I said, okay. I brought her out and she sat next to me and wanted nothing to do with anything. And they kind of all looked at each other and they're like, are you dead set on keeping this dog? I'm like, me? Absolutely not. I'm like, I can rehome her. Like, I'm not attached to her. Like, I don't want to sound mean, but because that was kind of more of a taboo thing to say back then. And I was like, but any dog we get in my family, I have to keep. And they're like, okay, well then can you get another dog? And I'm like, no, I'm not
Mm.
allowed to. And they're like, oh no, okay. So Waleed was really, really sweet. And he was like, you seem really serious. He goes, look, he goes, I usually come out here twice a week and we have a Belgian ring club and we train for Belgian ring. I'm like, look, I don't know what that is. And he's like, just stay for today, you know, in the weekend and you'll learn about it. And I'm sure you'll like it. He goes, you know, in my opinion, it's a lot more fun than Schutzhund. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, come out to club. And I'm like, great. This is fantastic because this club is 15 minutes from me. And they have a cool field, you know. So before I was used to a Schutzhund club, it took me an hour to get there because it was close to New York City. And we literally trained on concrete in a parking lot.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. It was rough. So, like, this was heaven. This was heaven to me. This place had a very small field, but it was very set up. It had jumps, it had grass, it had, you know, tunnels and all sorts of cool stuff, right? So I was like, you tell me what days, when, and I will be there. So I changed everything around to make sure I could be at club twice a week. And a huge thank you to Waleed for that because I mean, just getting your foot in a door with any of these clubs or trainers was very, very difficult back then. And, you know, he facilitated that, which I'm forever thankful for. Um, and I ended up going out twice a week and started learning a lot. My puppy still sucked. Everybody tried to get her to do bite work and she was not having it. She just would not bite. Um, and it was up from there. I did not end up keeping her. I kept her until she was a year old. I put a ton of work into her, and Waleed convinced me that she would teach me a lot. I he was working with do you remember Judd?
I think so. Yeah.
Judd was super cool. Um, Waleed taught me a shit ton about training. So I was learning Napopo, you know, at 20 years old before Napopo was even a thing, right?
Yep.
I learned how to do all this stuff, but again, remember, I was afraid of e-collars and I didn't like them. And Waleed did not pressure me into using them. He just basically told me in time that I would love e-collars and I could use this dog to learn on because she's a great dog to learn on because she has problems. And I'm like,
Good
okay,
point.
fair enough. I'm
Yeah.
stuck with her either way right now, you know, fair enough. So that's what ended up happening. And I ended up absolutely falling in love with e-collars because once you start using them properly, you realize the potential in them. And as you learn more about um, you know, dogs and behavior and reinforcement, it makes sense. It makes sense. And I was so in love with the freedom that I could get on dogs in a pretty short sense of time because before, I mean, I had to F around with long lines and have help and do all this for 2 years before I could even have a dog off leash, you know.
Oh,
I
yeah.
knew that process. I was familiar with that process. So to have this at my fingertips and to see that if it's introduced correctly and used correctly, the dogs are equally happy about it. It went from being a scary, forbidden thing in my mind to being the greatest thing ever. And I think, you know, like I said, I owe a lot of that to Waleed and otherwise I probably would have never had correct. I got lucky in that sense that I had very correct exposure to that pretty early on, and then obviously I messed around with a lot of other training methods too during that time, and then I started apprenticing under Waleed and Judd. Judd was kind of, you know, if you knew the relationship between Waleed and Judd back then, Waleed was the hardcore trainer and Judd was the businessman. And I I liked training with both of them. And this is important. I like training with both of them because I loved learning all the crazy deep dog training with Waleed, but I loved learning about the business and how to deal with clients, how to work with clients, how to go into people's homes, how to converse with them. Because I was kind of I wasn't, I was more, I don't want to say shy is not quite the word for it, but I was not an extroverted teenager or young person. I was more quiet and shy, and going into homes and dealing with strangers was pretty scary for me back then. Now I have no issue doing it. It's fine, but it was scary for me back then. And Judd, it was where he thrived. It was where he
Wow.
thrived, and so cool to watch him interact with people. And there was nothing, uh I say manipulation, but it was not bad manipulation. It was beneficial manipulation, and how he worked with people and how he got people to do the things that they needed to do. And I just thought it was so cool, and I loved hanging out with Judd, and he was super funny. He had a really great sense of humor. I still talk to Judd to this day too. And I'm thankful for that early on too, because it was like no matter what, Judd always kept a good sense of humor about things. Even if shit was hitting the fan, Judd would find something to make a crack about or laugh about, and I appreciated that about him. He was just really good with people, really, really good with people. So I think I was lucky in that sense. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of dog training schools that popped up after that, because I think about it now and I was like, I don't know. I don't think there were really options for dog training schools that long ago. And I don't know, like, if I wanted to become a dog trainer, I don't know that I could have done it any other way other than finding a dog trainer to apprentice
Mm-hmm.
under. And then dog training schools really started popping up, franchises popping up, and obviously that's how we met you, you know. But yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy how everything kind of intertwines and connects and circles back after a while.
Yeah,
But here I am today.
a couple things that stood out to me was your German Shepherd. He was kind of a health mess. And then something that was like front of mind for you was their health testing. Even though
Yeah.
you didn't know how to qualify
Nope.
that, but you knew that it was critical because of the journey that he pointed you on in that direction. Like, this is important. Um,
Yes.
and then, wow, having Judd is huge. Like, my podcast has evolved into like really focusing on how important the business side of having a dog training business is. A lot of
Yeah.
dog trainers are like, I'm an amazing dog trainer. I'm going to work on my dog training skills, but it's really cool to work on your business skills. And you
To be good at
definitely,
both.
yeah, you were lucky with Judd. That is just such an amazing journey.
I still absolutely suck at paperwork and like office work, but at least I know how to train dogs and I can deal with people,
I,
At least I have those things.
I can help you with the organization side. Francis Metcalf is actually a client of ours too.
Is he
And
really?
yep, yep.
Yeah,
And
it's so hard.
yeah, it's a lot,
I
but
think our brains are not set up for that stuff.
well,
You know,
the confidence as a girl like out there with the guys doing all this stuff,
yeah, yeah,
it's
it's hard.
it's crazy, and it's also like I look at the dog, the teeth get worn down with all the biting, and there's a lot of risk sending my super fast dog on a decoy that maybe doesn't know how to catch a super fast dog who's really small, and if
Yeah,
he falls on her he kills her. And it takes grit and guts, because it is an amazing sport. And with
yes.
Malinois, if it ain't risky, it ain't fun. So,
Right. They're bred to do crazy stuff,
yeah,
so you're
if you
do
don't do
crazy
crazy
stuff.
stuff, it's
Yeah,
going to be
yeah. But
a
you
crappy
know,
life for them in a way. That's what they
right,
want to
right.
do.
It's barn hunt and all that stuff's cool, but that's not enough for them.
Yeah.
It's, well, most of them. I'm sure there's some out there that are perfectly happy sleeping all day, and they're not the norm. But yeah, it's just it's been a journey. I mean, it's like I could talk about experiences in dog training for 3 days straight. You know, it's there's just I've lived so many lives, even just within dog training. So there's been so many chapters. Even from travel and then moving and then working on two completely opposite coasts. I'm dealing with different types of people, different
Mm-hmm.
dogs, um, changing sports, all that stuff.
Now,
Uh,
you started to travel to go source out dogs. Would you be able to pick out a story, maybe the Fat Louie story,
sure.
or
Yeah. So I can actually segue it from my not so good Malinois puppy after enough time with her. I ended up moving out of my house at like 19. So, I had the freedom at that point to get another dog if I wanted, because I was responsible for my life at that point, right? And I could rehome the not so good puppy. Her name was Minx. So I could rehome Minx and I could get a new dog. And I had gotten a couple of like whatever, young adult Malinois and a puppy here and there from Waleed. Waleed basically was like, we can try a puppy from here, we could try, and so we did. And he made me get rid of every single one of them because they were no good. They were all bad. And I was like, well, I just want a really good dog, like, like you have. And he's like, we got to go to Belgium. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, we have to go to Belgium. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah. He goes, I'll call up Dirk, which was our friend over in Belgium. And he had all the connections. And he said, I will have Dirk start looking for a really nice male puppy for you. And we'll wait. And again, just reminding for everybody listening, maybe those that are a bit younger, we had to do phone calls back then. So that involved, I'm dating myself here, that involved going to the corner store in New York City. I lived in New York City at the time. Going to the corner store in New York City, buying a calling card. We had to have prepaid calling cards, and they were very expensive to be able to call Europe. And then we had to stay up till like 2 o'clock in the morning
yeah,
because there was the time difference. And then obviously, they have to work and things over there too. So there was this short little window in which we could communicate with each other. They did not have email. We had email over here, but Belgium at that time, of course, they could go buy computers, I'm sure, if they wanted to, but most of them did not own computers, let alone have email, right? And they still had landlines. Most of them didn't have cell phones, things like that. Um, so we were at their mercy, so we had to call, right? And so that's how we communicated. I didn't get videos and pictures of puppies that were available. I didn't get to know shit about parents or anything like that. I was trusting everything to our friend Dirk
mm-hmm.
to find me the right dog. And he found me the right dog. And so we got the news that there was a litter that was born, and he reserved the only male in the litter.
Wow.
Well, because the breeder at the time, I feel bad now, but the breeder at the time didn't know it was going to America. So he thought the puppy was for Dirk,
Mm.
which was probably really exciting for him. But, kind of, I guess later when he found out it was going to the States, he was kind of like, what the hell, But
Yeah.
anyway, so Waleed's like, okay, we're going to go to Belgium. Now, Waleed has spent a lot of time in Belgium prior to me coming around. So it was not a big deal for him. But for me, I'd never left the country. So this was very exciting for me. Probably one of the most exciting things that's ever happened to me. And I had no idea what to expect because I don't know a goddamn thing about Belgium. And we booked our flights, and it was eye opening. It was
Mm.
eye opening. I'd never experienced anything like this before in my life. And we got there, we got picked up from the airport by Dirk, and just got thrown into a whirlwind of new food, completely different customs and way of life, going to all these NVBK training clubs and watching Belgian Ring in its motherland, visiting where Malinois can't come from and the origins of everything. Seeing dogs, the quality of dogs that I saw was like nothing I had ever seen in my life. And I would just watch Malinois after Malinois after Malinois, really nice ones get paraded out in front of me. On that first trip, and trips after that, I saw famous dogs, now famous, but then they were young. And I mean, it was just, again, another kind of overwhelming in a good way moment. There was a lot of drinking, a lot of drinking, and it was great. It was, in order to talk and get information there, you basically had to hang out with and drink with all these guys. It was mostly guys, right? And ask them things, ask them about their dogs, ask them about the parents of their dogs. And that was the only way you could get that information. And I just had so many questions, and my head was ready to explode by the time we were leaving. And I didn't get to see Louis until the last day we were there, because we didn't want to take the puppy until right
Uh,
before we had to leave. Yeah. So we went to the breeder's house, and it looked like every other normal house in Belgium. It wasn't like a big kennel or anything. And he had a beautiful little backyard. It was very green, very grassy, and lots of really cool plants and stuff. And over kind of off to the side was this little kind of enclosed kennel ish area. And there was, mom, and she was not friendly. But that's okay. So he grabbed her and put her away. And oh no, I'm sorry. He grabbed her, pulled her out. Dirk gave her a bite on a sleeve, and I was like, wow, she bites so good, but she wasn't friendly. And then they put her up and put her away somewhere. And then he said, okay, here's the puppies, and brought out the puppies. And things were a lot different there, and also back then. Those puppies, I don't think they'd seen humans. They were not handled. They were all kind of like, oh God, what are these? And kind of sitting there and wouldn't come over to you. And then he just grabbed them all by the scruff and pulled them out onto the grass one by one. And he's like, that's the male, that's your puppy. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I kind of was just like, my experience with puppies was like, they're usually pretty friendly and everything. And I just kind of walked over kind of calmly to go see. And he was like, who are you? And I was like, oh God, okay. I looked at Waleed. I was like, are you sure? Like they're
wow.
good. And he's like, this is normal here. This is normal. He goes, they don't do anything with the puppies. It's a little bit different. He goes, basically he's just, you come pick up your puppy, and from that day on,
That's when it starts.
that's when
Yeah.
it starts. I'm like, oh God. And I think he was like 6 weeks old. They were 6 weeks old.
Wow.
And so I don't, know what it had to do with anything, but he grabbed my puppy, put him in a bucket, weighed him. And I have a picture. I have a picture of it. It was cute. And that was it. And so when you go there, we were invited to stay for like breakfast brunch. And so we did. And the breeder was really cool. And he was this big Belgian dude, and he could put down, I'm not a case like a 6-pack. He could put a case of beer down in the night, which was quite a feat, because I'm sitting there like, oh my God, how do you even drink that much? But he was a big Belgian guy, and his name was Fat Louis. And his name was Louis, and everybody called him Fat Louis. And so I was like, perfect name for my puppy. And so I that's how Fat Louis got his name.
I love it.
And yeah, and the rest is history. Brought him back, and that dog taught me a lot, because he had no exposure to anything. He didn't know anything. He was as blank of a slate as you can get, and ended up being a phenomenal dog. You know, I put the time in. I brought him to college with me. I was still going to college classes at that point.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I even brought him to class sometimes with me. My Some of my professors were cool with it, and I let him run around the classroom. And he was stealing things out of people's book bags. But back then, it wasn't a big deal. As long as it wasn't during the summer, which it wasn't, I could just put him in a crate in the back of my vehicle in the parking lot, and it was okay. So that's what I did. And yeah, he came everywhere with me, and he ended up being an absolutely phenomenal dog.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
You've had a lot of
So
phenomenal dogs. But we are getting to the end of the hour, and I know there's so much I want to ask you, so we're going to have a part two because I want to
we can have a
talk.
part. Sure.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about like your the experience that I went through when I got my perfect angel from you, and like how
Yeah.
what you do, how you figure that breeding part out, what you do
Yeah.
with the puppies, how you picked my puppy for me, and kind of that part of the journey. And then for
Sure.
us as like dog sport people, dog trainers, what are the do's and don'ts of when we first get that baby puppy from you, bring it home. So you, of course, taught me a lot when I got my perfect angel. So I would love to have another podcast where we can dive into like that component.
Absolutely.
But
I'd
before
love
we
to.
wrap up, I would love if you could share a little bit about DOGenius and
Sure.
um, Loucyn. Loucyn, am I saying it
Yeah.
right? Okay. And
Yeah. Yeah.
please,
Good. You said it right.
I've always looked at it. I'm like, because that's your kennel name, right? Your
It
breeding.
is. Yeah.
Okay.
It
And
is
why
Loucyn.
is it?
Yeah.
Why do you call it Loucyn?
Um, it's a joke. So when Waleed and I split, so we had Barik Malinois together,
Yes,
right?
I remember.
Started and developed Barik Malinois together, and that name was near and dear to me. I came up with it. It had a lot of meaning, a lot of meaning. And when we split, I did want to keep it. I did. I very much wanted to keep it, but at that point, I did not want more stress in my life. And Waleed also wanted to keep the name, and I was kind of just like, okay, fine. You can keep the name. I'll just come up with another one. It's fine. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. And so I just had so much trouble coming up with another name that had the same meaning to me, And I was a little irritated about it, if I'm being honest. And I just, kind of was looking around for inspiration and everything. And I just couldn't find it. I came up with a couple of names, decided I didn't like them. It just didn't, it wasn't, it wasn't special enough. It wasn't unique enough. And then I, Sin, who was my Rodan daughter, um, she was a house dog and slept on my bed at night, and she was always kind of hanging out around me, and I had her. And Louis was not a very good house dog. He was pretty wild, and it just never changed, even with trying to manage him and giving him, place. He would stay on place. So I had him. I just happened to have him out on place. It was the only place he was allowed to be on, or else it was just danger. And Sid was right there, hanging out next to him, and I just was like, some people put their names, like the human names, together to make a kennel name, or they name it after themselves. I was
Mhm.
like, what if I just combine the two dogs that I had, just combine their names? And I was just like, oh, Loucyn. And I was like, oh, that'd be
Oh,
funny as a joke. And I kind of just jokingly said, I'm going to call my kennel Loucyn because those are the only two dogs I have. And it stuck.
that is
So that's
cool.
it. There's no Zen moment. There's no deep meaning to it. It was literally just a joke, and it stuck.
I'm
So
so excited to hear that story because that makes perfect sense. So simple. Love it.
it was so simple. It was a joke, and
Yeah.
I just, you know what? It sounds like a word. It sounds like a word, and
Yep.
nobody else. as that. I'm never going to worry about anybody else
Yeah.
having that. And in time, it became special, because those two dogs became very special, and it made its own meaning in time. It's very reflective of that point in time.
Yeah, I think sometimes we put too much thought into a name. I think nowadays, a lot of dog trainers want to name their business something that sounds like a big corporation,
Right.
very prestigious, but it's going to get muddled with
Yeah.
other names that sounds so bland and sterile. I think taking a
Yeah.
last name. Oh, go ahead.
I had a hard time coming up with the business name, and I don't know if it's the best name there is out there. I could find problems with anything. And Dog Genius was I did not make it in the sense of I think I'm a genius. I made it in the sense of your dog. Your
Yeah,
dog is a genius. You just don't know it yet. Like it's kind of one and the same. And then I started out with just Dog Genius, but somebody over in Europe made Dog Genius. I don't know if it was around the same time that I did or after, but they ended up taking that name. And so that's when I made it Dog Genius Canine Education. That way there was no trademark or copyright issues or anything like that.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's not me. Like I didn't make it Dog Genius saying like I'm a genius. Your dog's a genius.
right.
You
That's
know?
the way I took it. So don't worry.
Okay.
I
Okay.
we're,
Yeah,
um,
because like I said, I could find problems with anything. So I was kind of like, do people think that? And sometimes it could be a little hard for people to read. But I think the reason I like it is because it's more unique instead of I'm not going to give any other names as examples, but some of the other I don't know. I feel like some of the other business names out there are very overused. So
yeah,
um,
and they get mixed up, and that's what I was going through. I created Pet Biz Experts, which is
yeah,
software, CRM,
I like
some coaching, but then, it's Pet Biz. Like there's other businesses with that name, like Pet
right.
Biz Insurance and things like that. And then I had two other companies that named their businesses Pet Biz something, and we were all doing the same thing. And I actually had like one of my very good friends sign up under that one instead of mine. But I'm like, that's not even me, dude. So there was brand confusion. I've had her clients come over to me being confused. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to change the name. We did have it first. I went through all of that, but when I talked to lawyers, I'm like, it's not worth fighting over.
It,
And when I
yeah,
really looked at the space SEO wise on the first page of Google, automation dogs vacant. There's nothing. Like I was like automation gators, automation grizzlies, like let's power, let's something. Those were taken. But when I was like automation dogs is available, oh my gosh. And I was able to get the .com. And I think that's an important part too when we're choosing a
yeah,
business name is the .com does build trust for, people who are doing their research. So if you can get the .com, but there was a lot of people squatting on good names, the
yeah,
.coms, and they're like
yeah.
$15,000 and you can have
No,
this name. And it's like,
yeah,
no, I'm not
I don't
going to
need
do
it.
that. I love the concept of Loucyn because you've created something that no one else is going to
Right,
get, and it's
right,
personal to you, so personal to you with those two
right.
dogs. It's the beginning. So yes, use your last name, use something original that no one's going to
Everybody
want to
thinks,
take.
well, everybody on like social media that didn't already know me, like if they didn't know me in the last before the last 5 years, probably they think my last name is Lucin.
Yep.
So they think the kennel is named after me, after my last name. So that's kind of funny too,
Yes.
because I've gotten a couple of payments addressed Stephanie Lucin, and I'm
I
like,
could see that.
no.
I could
I
see
was like,
that.
that's not my last name. And I'd change it, but my dad would kill me. So
And there's one more thing I wanted to ask you because I saw on Facebook. I don't know if you want to share, but I did see that you're coming out with maybe a sport dog type lesson or class.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I generally refrained from offering that previously because I guess the short way to put it would be took it kind of killed my personal desire to train my own dogs at the end of the day, because I'd be working with people for more competition style training, and it would just exhaust my brain, and at the end of the day I'm like, oh, I don't feel like doing this with my own dogs. Versus like the pet dog training, we both know we can go on autopilot a little bit with that,
Yep.
and it's less psychologically intense. It's less mentally intense for us. So if I'm doing, not that I don't give my all to my pet clients, it's just much more basic remedial work that
Totally.
I'm doing with them. So when I'm doing sport competition coaching, I'm just going to call it coaching, right? um, it's a lot more mentally labor intensive for me. And that's why I refrained from offering it earlier. And then the other reason is because it's just one of those things that I feel like no matter how much I've done and how much I've learned, there's always a part of my brain that's like, nah, you're not good enough to offer that.
Mm.
And in reality, I get out there and I'm like, how do people not know this? I, like it's normal for me, or I'm finding myself constantly sharing with other people, whether it be trainers, people that got puppies from me, things like that are struggling. And I'm like, this is, this is non-negotiable for me, and I can absolutely help people with all of this. And I just thought, I thought everybody knew that, or I thought everybody had access to this already, or were already doing these things, and they're not. So, and also just, I think through the years, I've gotten good at creating roadmaps, because I've raised so many dogs. I've not just Malinois, not just Malinois. I've raised so many dogs, and just because I don't have them right now doesn't mean it didn't happen. So like I have my pit bull now, and it's like every time I have a new dog, it doesn't matter what breed it is, they always teach me something, right? And this dog has challenged me. He's really challenged me, maybe not in conventional ways, but he's a lot of dog. And so and Alfie is another one. Alfie's my favorite dog, right?
Hmm.
And he's my buddy, and he means the world to me. I wouldn't sell him for $1 million, right? But out of all the dogs that I'm working right now, he is probably one of my hardest to train. And that's weird for a lot of people, because they look at our relationship and it's like, that must be your favorite dog and your easiest dog to train. He has not been easy. He has not been easy. So I have so much experience with so many different types of dogs, different breeds of dogs, independent dogs, up your ass, handler oriented dogs. I have my preferences of dogs that I like, but it doesn't mean I haven't worked with the latter. So I can definitely, I'm at a point in my life where I feel like it could be really beneficial to people,
Yes.
and trainers, especially, maybe people to um, struggling to really develop that relationship with their dog.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, I offer that now.
Yeah, and I can
And
say firsthand, you're a good sounding board for me because with Flirty, she's very independent. And
sure.
as a young dog getting ready to go to like the world team and compete in Russia, compete in Poland, I'm like, this dog, I had to really work, because
Yeah.
she would get out on the field and she's like, where's the decoy? Like, that's my favorite thing. And just
Yep.
very independent. She'll go lay in the other room and go to bed by herself. Like, she's not an up your butt dog, which I
Yeah.
loved, but she's taught me
Sure.
so much. But I reached out to you. I reached out to Oscar because he has her sibling, Wapo, because there's
Yep.
just some things when she gets in prey, and I'm like, wow, she's different. And I love
Yep.
that you just said, you've seen much more. Than me, than most of us. Another thing is the way you are with puppies. So I remember bringing a puppy to you, and I'm like, once he gets on the bite, it's great, but you get him off. And
Yeah.
he's a
Yeah.
puppy. I don't want to be correcting him and stuff.
Right.
I'm over here with my little tug buddy.
Yep.
And working through that in a positive way was super cool. And
Yep.
seeing that now, what we did to get that puppy to like switch, I was just like, that was fun
Yep.
and amazing. And just, I learned so much. So imagine all of the things that you've seen,
And
with
I
all your
get it because I'm
experience.
there too, and I wanted things to happen and make things happen and make them happen
Yep.
faster. I get it. A lot of the young trainers, they may not say this, but they're in a rush to prove themselves, right?
Mm,
And I'm at the point in my life where honestly, Lianne, I don't care if I title another dog ever. Like it's not about that for me. Like I am so about the journey now
yep.
and the relationship, and like that's what is in it for me. It's like I'm seriously training 5 dogs for sport right now. 5. 2 is a lot.
One
2
is
is
a
a lot.
lot.
So, yeah, there's a rotation there, and people are like, yeah, you're never going to get on the field with this dog. And I'm like, that's okay. And it's quiet
Hmm.
because my whole attitude is like, that's okay now. And if my dog makes a mistake in training, I used to get so stressed, Lianne. I'd get so stressed. I had so much pressure on me. Everything needed to be perfect. We've been there, right? And now my club makes fun of me because if my dog screws something up, I'm sitting there dying laughing, which is very different from my reaction of maybe 7, 10 years ago, and further back was even worse, right? um Things where, and again, maybe this is another podcast for another day, but things where I felt pressured, I felt embarrassed,
Hmm.
I felt incompetent, now rolls right off my shoulder, and I'm genuinely humored by my dog's horrible attempt at whatever the hell that they just did. And I'm like, it's cool, we can start over. I'm like, today's not the day. and
Yeah.
and that's it. And I still, after all these years, no matter how many I have, love puppies.
Yeah, you
I
you are
love puppies.
awesome, awesome for puppies. And I think too, like when our dogs aren't perfect in trial or as we're prepping for trial or whatnot, as we're training, that's where, we go back, we figure it out, we break it down, and we try to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Right.
So we learn from those moments. If it's perfect and like you qualify for the world team, perfect, 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 you're gonna get
Yeah.
on the world team and you're gonna flop. So you got to get kicked in the face in order to
Yeah.
break things down and figure out why that happens so that in trial it hopefully does not happen.
Right. And if you're doing things, in my opinion, it's just an opinion, if you're doing things for the right reasons, everything else kind of falls into place,
Hmm.
and becomes a lot easier to kind of shrug off and just be like, we're here. Dude, we're here. We
Yeah.
got here. You know? I was never able to compete internationally because I'm a breeder. I'm a breeder. I'm stuck here a lot, you know?
Yeah.
I'm stuck here a lot. I have to take care of dogs. I have to take care of puppies, raise puppies up, and that's okay. I understand what I traded off, and I signed up for that. Um, but I mean, you've done it. You've been there. You've flown over with your dog, and you've gotten to a world championship, right? And just getting there is an accomplishment, right?
Yeah.
Would I like to do that earlier? Me, absolutely. Now I'm kind of like, I don't know,
It's a
traveling
lot.
stressful, but uh it's an accomplishment, and you love, I we don't have to question this, but you love your dog,
I
right?
love him.
And just being there, win or lose or anything in between, was an experience enough, and exciting enough and cool enough. So once you kind of embrace that versus I need to prove myself, I need to impress people. I need to impress other trainers. All that stuff becomes background noise, you know, and it's just the experience of getting to that level with another being that you cherish, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's more powerful than a trophy. You know, trophies are cool; they're good memories, but at the end of the day, like just being in that place with your dog and accomplishing those goals, however long it took, that's the cool part. And for me, the better part is the journey. I'm just enjoying the journey with all of them now. I'm not in a rush. So I think if I can help others, if I can help others get there in any way, I might be valuable to do that. You know, I may not be a big, strong 6'2" guy, you know, that is catching your dogs on courage tests, but I have a lot to offer, you know,
Yes.
I have a lot to offer and can definitely help with a lot of foundation and relationship work with the dogs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Excellent. This was just so much fun. I really appreciate hearing your story and just quite an adventure that you've been on. I'm so proud of
Yeah,
you, and you've just
thank
done
you.
such amazing things with your life, and you're just doing it, solo woman, entrepreneur,
Out in the wild.
respected, reputable breeder, offering advice and help to others. Just amazing. So, where can folks find you if they have questions or want to check you out?
I'm very active on social media, so I try to keep up with social media and keep a presence. And you know, for the Malinois working dogs, you know, Loucyn, right? Loucyn Malinois on Instagram for the training, DOGenius Canine Education on Instagram, and also, you know, .com for the website, but it's all linked up there. And then on Facebook, the account that I use most is Stephanie Loucyn. And, you know, anybody is welcome to hit me up there too. Like I said, I'm pretty active on there. I check my messages often.
Yeah, I love watching the videos of Alfie, and it's just
Yeah,
very
thing.
dynamic, very impressive dog. Wow.
He loves being on camera, so I can't
Aw.
deny him. Me, not so much. I'm a little camera times, but he loves it, so why not?
Yep, he's awesome to watch. Well, thank you. Again, it's Stephanie O'Brien, Dog Genius Education,
Canine education.
Dog Genius Canine Education.
Perfect.
Okay, .com. And again, I'm Lianne Shinton. You can find us at automationdogs.com. And let's do a part two where we dive in a little bit more to that puppy part.
Let's do it. Just remind me where we left off.
Yep, I'm on it. All
All
right.
right. Awesome.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having me on, Leanne.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Have a great day.